Grab some dragon meat and a nice bottle of Sapachka, because it's finally here, the latest episode of The Mandalorian, or as I like to call it, the only reason I still have a Disney Plus subscription. In this video, we'll be going over all the cool details you might have missed, like what that object was the Tuskens pulled out of the dragon, Cobb Vanth's Boba Fett armor, and of course that insane reveal. But before we begin, make sure to like and subscribe with that bell on, as I plan on covering every episode of the season. Do it! The last we saw of Mando and the child, they were taking off in the Razor Crest in search of Baby Yoda's people, a mission tasked to him by the Armorer, who we got to see kick some ass at the end of Season 1. They've landed on a new planet in search of Gor Koresh, an alien from the Abyssine species. You may remember seeing one of them in A New Hope when Luke and Obi-Wan meet Han Solo in the cantina. Gor is voiced by John Leguizamo, and Mando thinks he may have some leads where he can find his fellow Mandalorians. They watch a battle between two Gamorreans, a species you may remember from Return of the Jedi. And it isn't long before Mando is held at gunpoint for his precious Beskar armor, something Gor says the price of has gone through the roof. But Mando uses his whistling birds, small guided missiles which he obtained from the Armorer in Episode 3 of Season 1, as well as his Mandalorian dagger known as a cow, to make quick work of Gor and his thugs. Tracking him down and stringing him up using his grappling line, Mando finds out that Gor knows of one Mandalorian hidden away on a small town on Tatooine called Mos Pelgo. Mando thinks that's odd, since he's been on Tatooine before and never heard of any Mandalorian being there. He actually visited Tatooine back in Season 1, Episode 5, and we'll get to how the reveal at the end of that episode ties into the reveal at the end of this one. And in true Mando fashion, he leaves Gor to fend for himself against these red-eyed creatures and makes his way to Tatooine, where we reunite with Peli Motto. She recalls how he hates droids. Droids killed his parents after all, but he's had a change of heart.
Oh! So he likes droids now.
A result of how a droid like IG-11 sacrificed himself at the end of Season 1. Peli tells Mando that Mos Pelgo was wiped out by bandits and can barely be found on any maps. We even get a nice reintroduction to R5-D4, the droid that Jawas tried to sell to Luke in A New Hope. She also makes reference to a city on Tatooine called Mos Espa, which you might remember as the site of the pod races in The Phantom Menace. Mando grabs a speeder and heads off to this mysterious mining town of Mos Pelgo, arriving like he's a gunslinger or samurai in a Kurosawa movie, except a horse has been substituted for a speeder. At the local cantina, he meets the proprietor from the Weequay species, another race found in Return of the Jedi. There he meets the town's marshal, which also happens to be the title of the episode. He's a man by the name of Cobb Vanth, played by Timothy Olyphant, and he's wearing Boba Fett's armor. The last we saw of Boba Fett, he was thrown into the Sarlacc pit in Return of the Jedi, so this armor basically confirms he somehow made it out, and we'll get to that reveal later in the episode. He tells Mando he got it off some Jawas in exchange for a Camtono of silicax crystals, something he stole from the miners after escaping their attack on the town after the fall of the Empire. If you want to learn a little bit more about what a Camtono is, check out my Season 1, Episode 1 breakdown. This isn't the first time Cobb Vanth has been seen in the Star Wars universe. Chuck Wendig's Star Wars canon novel Aftermath features him arguing over a set of Mandalorian armor and includes further backstory involving how he fights against crime syndicates disguising themselves as mining companies after the fall of the Hutt cartel. He'll later use the Mandalorian armor to drive the miners out of his town, so we can see why he won't easily give it up. And it's totally awesome that we actually get to see his missile in action. And it looks like a good old-fashioned duel will take place between Mando and Cobb to decide who will get this precious armor, but they're interrupted by an earthquake caused by a giant crate dragon. Believe it or not, you've probably seen one of these dragons before. Well, at least the skeleton of one, as it's seen in the background in A New Hope. This giant sand reptile has been plaguing the town and even eats an entire bantha. Crate dragons are native to Tatooine and hunted for their precious pearls. That's what we see at the end of the episode when the Tuskens carve up its carcass. Crate dragons were known to digest stones to assist in their digestion, and sometimes, in rare occasions, these stones would contain kyber crystals, the same crystals used to make lightsabers. Over time, they'd form into these smooth pearls, making them extremely valuable. Cobb and Mando make a deal. If Mando helps to kill the creature, Cobb will give up his armor. Cobb and Mando enlist the help of local Tusken raiders to take on the dragon, an alliance which doesn't sit well with the local populace. You might recognize Cobb's speeder here, which is made from an engine that Anakin used in the pod races in The Phantom Menace. The Tuskens had raided Mos Pelgo in search of water, which apparently they were stealing. In this way, both groups aren't really seen as the bad guy. Both of them are just doing what they have to provide for their people. In an act of friendship, the Tuskens give Cobb a black melon, an egg-shaped fruit native to the Junlan wastes of Tatooine which contains milk. Milk that Obi-Wan said tasted horrible and that Cobb refuses to drink.
It stinks.
Mando and the Raiders try to lure the dragon out of an abandoned Sarlacc pit. These things eat Sarlaccs. The Tuskens have been feeding the crate for years in an attempt to keep it sleeping and stopping it from plaguing their villages. If they're going to get this thing out, they're going to need more people, and that's where the villagers of Mos Pelgo come in. The crate dragon has been a nuisance for the town, eating their animals and disrupting their mining halls, and it could be any day that it totally swallows the town whole. So they decide to join forces with the Tuskens, providing much needed explosives to take it down. You may also have noticed that during the final dragon sequence, the aspect ratio changes to full screen. I'm not 100% certain of the specs, but it probably meant this action sequence was shot in IMAX. And what better way to welcome Jon Favreau, his first directing gig on the show, by giving him and us this awesome treat. The Tuskens say the dragon's only weak spot is its belly, so if they can lure it out on top of the explosives, maybe they stand a chance at killing it. They do everything they can to get its attention, but their barrage of ballista, blasters, and grenades isn't enough. The explosives go off, but it only infuriates the dragon further, vomiting out its corrosive bile at its attackers. Its carapace is just too strong, even for the explosives, so Mando takes matters into his own hands by luring the dragon next to a bantha loaded with dynamite. He even knocks Cobb's jetpack to make him get out of the way, even telling Cobb beforehand to take care of the child. He's willing to sacrifice himself for this. The dragon completely swallows both Mando and the bantha, but a few moments later spits Mando out after he uses his Ambien Phase Pulse blaster, which has an electrocution feature. We saw him use this briefly in Season 1 against the Trandoshan bounty hunters. Mando hits the detonator, the dragon explodes, and 10-year-old me watching Tremors for the first time jumps for joy.
Can you fly, you sucker? Can you fly?
With the dragon defeated, Cobb hands over the armor and tells Mando he hopes their paths cross again, so this might not be the last time we see him. He also says to tell his fellow Mandalorians that he wasn't the one to break that armor. That was likely caused by the Sarlacc, however, we do not know what happened between Boba Fett getting thrown into the pit and how it eventually ended up with the Jawas. Perhaps that will be revealed with the introduction of Boba Fett himself. The end of the episode sees actor Temuera Morrison, who played Jango Fett in the prequels, reveal himself as Boba Fett. Remember that Jango was allowed to keep one of his clone sons to raise on his own. This was Boba Fett, who would grow up to look exactly like Jango since he's a clone. It raises many questions, like why he's been in hiding and how or why he let his armor go. He's got a couple scars on his face, so he's been through a lot. He's also been following Mando and his adventures on Tatooine. The end of episode 5 sees a tattered robe figure hover over the corpse of Fennec Shand, a tattered robe which Boba also wears at the end of this episode. For those of you who have seen my Season 1 Episode 5 breakdown, you'll remember that the same boot spur sound effect used for that robed character is the same exact sound effect used when Boba Fett walks in Empire Strikes Back. Check out the 9-minute and 30-second marker in that video if you want to hear it for yourself. I'll leave a link in the description. A particular note in this episode is the absence of Moff Gideon, who we saw survive his crash and emerge from his ship holding a darksaber. Unfortunately, we're gonna have to wait a bit longer to have him back, and I wouldn't be surprised if part of next episode continues on Tatooine, especially knowing Mando is likely on a crash course with Boba Fett. Whether or not he's friend or foe remains to be seen. Thanks for watching, everyone. Every little like, subscribe, and share helps so much, so make sure to do that. For more bad takes, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ThinkStoryYT, and until next time, remember,
I have spoken.